To order at 7 o'clock. I would like to warn everyone that I have a bit of a scratch in my throat, so I apologize in advance for the potential coughing that I will be doing. I have talked way too much this week. Okay, I will call this meeting to order. Good evening, everyone. I am Janet Evans, Chair of the CA Board of Directors. Please remember that this meeting is being live streamed. You can find tonight's agenda and background materials on the CA Board's webpage, and links to these documents can also be found in the description section of the YouTube live stream. If you are virtual, please mute your mics unless you are speaking, and if you are in the room, please ensure your cell phones are silenced. Raise your hand to speak, and I will record the names in the order in which I see them. And if you are virtual, please use the chat feature, and as always, if those in the room can help me monitor that, I appreciate it. As we move through the meeting, I'll introduce each item on the agenda. Before a vote is taken, I will restate a motion as well as who motioned and who seconded. And if at any point you have trouble hearing me or the other board members, please say so. Oh, sorry.
Thanks, Susan.
Little reconfiguration going on here in the boardroom.
We're in the moving company.
Okay, our timekeeper tonight is Ashley Vaughn. Let's see. All right, announcement of closed meetings. Oh, wait, let me do a roll call vote. Sorry about that. Andy?
Present.
Sherry? Here. Ginny?
Yes.
Dick?
Here.
Lynn?
Here.
Tina?
Here.
Jess? Here. Eric?
Here.
Ashley?
Here.
Lakey?
Here.
And I am here. Okay, announcements of closed meetings held. On March 10th, there was a meeting of the Risk Management Committee. Members present were Lakey Boyd, Tina Horn, Jess Duvall, Ashley Vaughn, and Susan Krabby. The meeting closed at 6:30 p.m. and reopened at 7 p.m., closed under Section 4 of the Homeowners Association, consultation with staff personnel, consultants, attorneys, board members, or other persons in connection with pending or potential litigation or other legal matters. And it was to assess the general liability of the self-insurance and specific incidents and claims. On March 21st, there was a closed meeting of the Audit Committee held here at the CA headquarters. Committee members present: James Young, Timothy Redmond, Andrew Stack, Dick Bolton, Eric Greenberg. Vote to close was 5 in favor, 0 against. Closed under Section 4, consultation with staff personnel, consultants, attorneys, board members, or other persons in connection with pending or potential litigation or other legal matters. And it was to review several audit reports in consultation with staff personnel on legal matters. Meeting closed at 8:05 p.m. and 8:57, opened at 8:57 p.m. Lakey, do you want to make a?
Yes, I wanted to make a quick announcement that our general counsel, Mr. Anneton, is not present tonight because he is actually out of the country on reserve duty. So I just wanted to go ahead and mention that if there is a legal related question that someone on senior staff cannot field tonight, I will have to follow up with it after the meeting. Just wanted to go ahead and let everybody know he was out on reserve.
Okay, can I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Ginny moves. Do I have a second?
Second.
Eric seconds. Any opposition? Okay, vote is unanimous. Agenda is approved. All right, so tonight we have one resident signed up to speak up. We have Mr. Sherman Howell. Welcome. Is Sherman on the call?
I don't see him.
Okay. Okay, well, that was all we had signed up. Was there anyone else who was here for the resident speak up?
Janet,
Yes.
excuse me. I spoke with him earlier today. I know he was planning on joining, so.
If everyone's in favor, then we'll wait to see if he joins, and if he does, we will take a pause. All right. So on tonight's consent agenda, we have the approval of the minutes from February 24th and the approval of the Hickory Ridge representative to the Senior Advisory Committee. Approved. Okay, next up, we have board votes. First up is the public sewer easement and private storm drain and pathway easements for the medical office building, and the vote for wooden guardrails easement. So let's start with the wooden guardrails easement.
I move we approve the easement for the wooden guardrails.
Andy moves. Do I have a second?
Second.
Lynn
I
seconds. Oh. Lynn beat you to it. So Andy has
Quick, that
moved.
one.
Sorry?
She's quick, that one.
Yeah. I think there's an advantage in the room a little bit, you know. I see them quicker. All right. Andy has moved and Lynn has seconded. Is there any discussion? Okay, for the wooden guardrail easement, is there any opposition? Okay, it's a unanimous vote. All right, so the second vote is for the public sewer easement and private storm drain and pathway easements for the medical office building. Do I have a motion to approve this easement?
I move we approve the easement for,
Lynn moves, Andy seconds. Discussion, Jenny?
Yeah, I have an amendment. It's a really simple amendment. You know how we faced in Symphony, the Chrysalis over the summer, some events, there was some disturbance from Meriwether Post, you know, at the BSO, the U.S. Coast Guard, and the ballet. So what I'm trying to do is prevent that or avoid that with the medical building and CA's activity down at the lakefront. So that, you know, everybody can be happy with all the events that are planned, et cetera. So the amendment basically says, it's just asking people to coordinate. Now, I'm sure they will, but just in case. So number 4 here, you have 3 points here. This would be number 4. All public activities and events scheduled to occur on the building property that are not medical in nature shall be coordinated with the Columbia Association lakefront activities so as to complement each other and to avoid conflict. That's all it does. It's just to make sure that we don't, that they coordinate. And
Do you mean during the construction of?
no, activities, when there's performances. For example, CA could be having a film for families down at the lakefront. And in the medical building, the balcony there, they could be having a rock band. I don't think that's going to work too well. So you just want to get both parties, CA or its designee, and I don't know whether it would be Howard Hughes, the owner of the medical building, whoever it is over there, that they just simply check schedules and coordinate before anything gets locked in so that, you know, we all get along. That's all. That's all it means.
I'll second that.
I think Tina had a hand raised.
Yeah, hang on, I'm not logged in online. Tina did?
Mm-hmm.
Tina,
I have questions.
about the amendment
What's
or
the-
about the easement in general?
Yes, about the proposed amendment.
Okay.
What's the definition of a public event? Who's responsible for coordinating it, and who's got the final say-so?
Okay, public activities, if you want to say, well, public activities down at the lakefront is whatever CA is talking about having down there, and CA or its designee would be responsible. The other person responsible would be Howard Hughes or its designee, which could, you know, they will decide. They're grown-ups, they can decide. The idea is just to say, this board would really like them to coordinate so that we all are happy about whatever events are going to be down there, and our residents are happy, and that there's no conflict like what occurred in Symphony Woods. I'm trying to avoid a problem. And I have confidence that CA administration and staff will figure out how to do the goal here, and as Howard Hughes, I have confidence in, will also, or the person that owns the medical building will be able to do that. I don't think we need to spell it out. They will figure out, you know, it could be they do something at the medical building that's perfectly in keeping with a movie down there, or they do it earlier. I mean, they'll work this all out. I have confidence they will.
Okay.
I just don't want
Ginny,
to.
I'm cutting you off because you're babbling. Tina, or Jess, sorry.
It's okay. So I have a question because I'm a little confused as to why the amendment would be necessary, because this strikes me as an easement just for the purposes of construction. Or is it, I mean.
I was actually going to ask Dennis his thoughts because I'm
Yeah.
not sure.
I don't know that it really is the right place for, I mean, I don't disagree with the concept of what Ginny's trying to propose, but I don't know that this is the right place for
Well,
it.
I'd like to also answer that.
Dennis, do you have any thoughts on that?
I agree that it's, we certainly don't want to run events at the lakefront that are overrun or in conflict with events that might be run on the balcony at the MOB, Medical Office Building.
Yeah.
So yes, we would, now we reach out to, it's interesting, we are creating a downtown calendar, which I'm sure Howard Hughes would participate in, so that this doesn't happen not just with the Medical Office Building, but with events that might happen in the Chrysalis or events in the Colorburst Park. So we are working on that generally, and we are trying to put out a calendar for the entire downtown that CA would orchestrate. We want to do that for sure. We don't want to have events. It really has been as bad sometimes where there were events down that Clyde's ran an event that was completely contradictory to what we were running. So, and that was a couple years ago before COVID, but it's absolutely the right thing to do. We are already doing that though, and you would participate in that calendar. You would agree to.
So, so there's no harm in the board taking this position then and making sure. And why with the easement? Because when you're giving an easement away, it's an easement to public land. And that's something that's very, very, should be taken very seriously. So if we have an opportunity to simply say, I know Howard Hughes will be doing this, but Howard Hughes, or as I say, it's their designee, and CA or our designee, will just coordinate. That's all it is, so that we don't have an issue like we had in Symphony Woods, which, that's really all it does. And you use your easement to do that.
Sherry? And then Jess?
Yeah, based on what Dennis said, I think it's maybe a good idea to put in via a coordinated calendar. Just include that so that we know that that's the mechanism by which it's going to be done. And then that lets everybody know that that's how it's going to be coordinated.
I accept that as a friendly amendment.
Can we just put in that phrase? Yeah.
Jess, then Lakey, then Andy?
So I'm still confused because looking at the map here, the easement area is very small. So it doesn't make, would it not be that whatever amendment is being made would apply only to this small piece of property? I don't know, Dennis, if you have, I mean, to me, it just doesn't make sense that there would be an easement, a clause in the easement that governs a much larger area in an easement document that is about a very small piece of land. It just logically doesn't make sense to me. Again, I think we could certainly come up, the board could pass a motion that they want this process to happen. I just don't understand why it would be hidden in this little easement. Why wouldn't we have a separate document or separate thing that handled it?
Lakey?
My comment was going to be similar. I think that getting into the specificity and a legal easement agreement around naming a coordinating calendar, which may or may not be a tool next year, let alone 5 years, let alone 20 years. So I think an MOU, because I think the operational coordination is important, but I think tying it into a deed-related record, and again, CA land is not technically public land. It's obviously to the benefit of the community and lien payers. But I think I understand the idea, and it makes a lot of sense, and I support it. I don't know. I'm getting uncomfortable with the idea of putting such operational detail into an easement. I think that we could do a memorandum of understanding, maybe even attach it to the easement. So I guess kind of where you were going.
Andy?
Yeah, I mean, I understand Shari's, amendment there, but my problem is, if you put that in the easement language, then you basically bound CA to forever produce a calendar at downtown, because the easement runs forever.
I like that idea.
No, but that means, but this is like, no, but it's like, no, this is not a really good idea. So, I mean, I understand what you're trying to do, but I'm thinking, no, this is like, you don't want to put something in the records that's going to last forever that binds us to do something like, because maybe we don't, down the road, maybe the Downtown Columbia Partnership takes it over, or a new arts organization takes it over or something. That's why I'm just a little scared when you said, well, we'll put it in that we have to do the calendar, that there has to be a calendar. I do like the idea of an MOU. I mean, I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, an MOU attached to this.
Dick?
Yeah, just to clarify things, we do this all the time with easements. We use the fact that somebody wants an easement to get something in return, and it's very common practice. But I go along with Lakey and Andy. An MOU would certainly satisfy my
Ginny?
needs.
Oh, sorry. Were you done?
That's it.
Yeah, actually, I had a question for Dennis. When, for example, the 55-plus community in King's Contrivance, they needed an easement. And we really require that they put all the property in under a lien, right?
The annual charge, correct?
Yeah, but we didn't add that to this wording here. Yeah, we got it. We got the deal, correct?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, and I think there was another where, so the point I'm making is that when you're giving an easement, the person does benefit that is asking for the easement. So you're simply asking for something like this, which is no big deal. How we do it is okay with
So
me.
you're okay with the memo of understanding?
If we guarantee that quickly we will have an MOU attached to this that will accomplish the same thing, then I'm satisfied. I just want this done. I know Howard Hughes and their designee will do this, but you could be gone and somebody else, and I just want to avoid problems down at the lakefront like happened in Symphony Woods. And we all know about that.
Eric?
We all don't want that. So thank you.
Yeah, I'm on board with an MOU also, but
Yeah.
my general question to Dennis
Okay.
is, so these are all on lien assessed properties. Do we have any kind of regulation that specifies that someone on lien assessed property can't do something that conflicts with a CA event?
Are you saying that, so there's no, on the annual charge property, there's the I guess the entertainment component doesn't run with that. So there's no restrictions on, as long as they're within the bounds of the zoning, and they stay within the county regulations regarding sound and start and stop time, then they're fine. But we don't regulate that at all.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor for,
I'll withdraw it with it if the understanding is definitely
Can I
within a
finish?
short period of, I'm sorry. Okay.
we have a motion on the floor, which was, a memo of understanding was accepted as a viable alternative. Can I have, is there anyone opposed to a memo of understanding? Yes.
Can I just,
Please.
quick clarification, the MOU would be to just capture that we would coordinate and make sure we had complementary event, non-conflicting events. And I just want to be sure, because to Andy's earlier point, the idea of naming exactly how that would happen could actually, in the end, harm CA, in a long-term kind of way. So, okay.
Non-conflicting is
Yep,
correct.
non-conflicting.
MOU that states non-conflicting events that will accompany the easement agreement. All right. Is there any opposition to the amendment as stated? Okay, unanimous.
Thank you.
And is there any opposition to the easement with the amendment? Okay, also unanimous. Thank you. Okay, Sherman, I see that you've joined us. We will circle back around to resident speak out. You have, oh,
Yes,
sorry.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
As the requester.
One second.
of the easement, I wasn't quite clear. I mean, I'm, totally agree with the concept of an MOU to talk about coordination of events. It seems strange it would be attached to the easement. I don't understand the idea of it being attached to the easement.
Perhaps I misspoke. I meant accompany.
Conceptually or?
Yes, it will accompany, yes, correct.
Okay.
Whoever
Did
is
anybody have a
speaking, it's
different
hard to hear
understanding?
them. I hear you, Janet, but not whoever was speaking.
Sorry, that was Greg Fitchett, and he was just clarifying when I said attached to the easement, I was not saying that this would be a recorded document. This would be something that would accompany the easement and not
Thank you.
be a recorded, yeah. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Greg. So circling back around to Sherman Howell, good evening, and
Okay.
you have 3 minutes for your resident speak out.
Okay, and it's short too, because I've been talking.
If you could get a little bit closer to your microphone, it's a little bit hard to
Yeah.
hear you here in the boardroom.
I'm gonna have to buy a new computer. Okay, let me see.
Can't hear.
Can you hear me now?
No.
It's still a little bit soft.
Oh, let me get right up.
There you go. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, is that better?
It's much better, thank you.
Oh, okay, yeah. I gotta go out and buy me a new computer. I'm sorry. I just was on early with it. I was on the wrong screen, okay? So it's not Neil's fault. I went to the wrong page, okay? So anyway, I want to say thank you, Mrs. Chairperson, for this opportunity to meet with the Columbia Council to discuss CA's MBE purchasing policy and all that is associated with purchasing contracts. Whereas a lot of work by your staff has gone into your research. Questions remain on how the Columbia Association will meet the goal of the African American Coalition. And I just say the community, because we are part of the community, and the community will also benefit from what we consider to be a great amount of fairness. Now, for example, your staff, and they did a lot of work, your staff states that the Howard County has 855 minority firms. There was 384, 44% Black African American owned. The HCAC is glad to know that, but that's not what best, in our opinion, for the community. That's not what best or what we think is good for the community. And that's really not what we are seeking, but it's good information. What ACAC seeks is participation in CA contracts at a level equivalent to the population of Columbia. And we have a great population in here in Columbia, a good balanced population. And blacks are comprised 25% of that population. So that's why I'm here tonight, to seek 25% participation in CA's contracting. And your staff has proven that, the number of black firms that are in the county, I think, in the county. So you have that information. So that's why I'm here, and I'll sit, we can talk. You can ask me any other questions. I'm quite certain you can handle your job, but if you need me, I'll be sitting right here. Thanks.
Thank you, Sherman. Any questions? Thank you. We appreciate you coming out tonight. Moving on to board discussion. So that was timely because our first item up is the Minority Business Enterprise Program Policy Provisions.
Are you
Linda, you
not
forgot
discussing?
B,
I did.
6B.
Oh, I'm very sorry.
It's okay.
We went out of order.
Sorry, I forgot B under number 5. So this is the approval, under number 6, potential terms of dispersal of the Inner Arbor Trust grant. Earlier this week, I sent out a list of things, and basically it was simply that Inner Arbor Trust should be in compliance with the audit requirements, with any of the on-the-ground, like care for the woods policies. And Eric, so Eric sent an email earlier this week asking about the policy itself. Inner Arbor Trust is held to those standards for their own programming, and then they also collect logistics plans for events that are happening in the woods. So is there anything you'd like to add to that piece of it, Lynn?
No, I mean, this policy was developed by the trust in coordination with CA, and, you know, it's been adopted. We all follow it, or we try to follow it. When there are exceptions, we jump right on it. It's, you know, I think the guidelines are pretty, they're obvious, and they work.
And to that point, I think, to your point, Eric, in terms of compliance, it would be Inner Arbor Trust follows the same things, and then they would escalate if there's an issue with anyone
But
planning.
Janet, excuse me.
Yes.
How does that work? I mean, it's contingent on that, but is it contingent on future events?
No, I think
Or-
it would be when we release the fund, whatever we agree on tonight would be what is in place when we, as long as all of those conditions are met at the time that we are planning on releasing the funds, then we would release the funds. So no, it does not move forward. But I mean, I think in general, the trust has done a good job in enforcing the policies.
Right, so I don't understand why this would be a condition of releasing money when it's something that, I mean, the trust was the first one to really try to enforce policies in Symphony Woods. You know, CA had controlled it for 50 years, but it was when the trust took over these policies. And, you know, they have been careful and, you know, adamant about controlling the use of the land. So I don't know why this would be a condition. That's all.
Dick, and then Eric?
I'm rather confused about where this, I don't know if it's a motion or a suggestion or what came from. Robert's Rules of Order would say that you make a motion in the meeting. One of the board members makes a motion in the meeting as to what those conditions ought to be, and we treat it that way. Throwing something out in email from the chair with a list of this is what we're going to vote on,
Well, that was what we discussed in the last meeting. That was what that came from.
in the last meeting, it was said that you were going to come up with a list.
No, it was the list that we discussed in the last meeting.
Well, these items 2 and 3, I don't recall being discussed. I think the whole thing hung on the,
Okay, well,
On the-
would someone
on the-
like to make a motion?
I'd like to make a motion that we have one condition, and that is that the old, not the 2022, but the old financial statements, audited financial statements be produced by a given date. Lynn, what was the date you guys think you can have those available? The audited statements?
Okay, so Dick moves that the condition for release of the funds be based on receiving audited financial statements for 19, 20, and 21. Did you also agree with a date for when we could expect 22 as part of that?
Well, actually, I read the easement agreement, and it doesn't, the start date is when Inner Arbor gets their audited financial statements from their auditor, and once they get them, then they have a set period of time when they have to turn them over to CA. If you read the easement, that's what it says. It doesn't say that they have to be provided to CA at any particular time.
Tina's hand's been up for a while, since before the
30
made
days,
its
I think
motion.
they have to provide them within 30 days.
Eric, and then Tina?
I'll second the motion.
And we're at 30 seconds on this topic left.
Okay.
30 seconds on the topic, she said.
So Dick has moved and Eric has seconded. Further discussion?
Tina,
I think Tina was just giving us a
Tina, if you're
time.
talking, you're on mute.
You're muted.
Sorry about that. I would like to move a friendly amendment that we take all of the terms, Janet, that you outlined in your memo to us. Full compliance, receipt of the financials, full compliance with all previous grant agreements, and full compliance with the guidelines.
If that's a friendly agreement, I don't agree with it. It's a hostile. It'd be a hostile.
It's hostile that they should be in compliance with previously signed
I
agreements.
have a motion on the floor, Tina, that says that the.
Right, and I'm offering an
conditions-
amendment.
Just a point is that it would be a standard amendment, not a friendly one. Not,
Oh,
there's no
oh,
hostile
I beg your
amendments.
pardon.
Just
I'd
for,
like
just
to offer
for,
an amendment, please.
We try to
for
avoid
point of
hostile
order.
amendments when possible. All right, so Tina has moved that we amend to include full compliance with all previous grant agreements with CA and full compliance with the park protection guidelines.
I'll second that.
And the easements.
It goes to the person who made the initial.
Oh, you don't second the amendment? Okay.
No, you do.
So Dick gets to agree or not agree.
Well,
Well, no, that was only if it's a friendly amendment, right?
yeah, that doesn't apply here.
It's a standard amendment. We don't have to vote
So
on it.
basically, we vote now on the amendment.
Yes.
So then do I still second the amendment?
Yes.
Okay.
You do.
Yes.
You just vote on it.
I thought I
so
moved the
Tina-
amendment as a not friendly amendment.
Tina has proposed an amendment, Jess has seconded, that in addition to compliance with the audited agreements, that CA be in full compliance with all previous grant agreements with CA, full compliance with the park protection guidelines. So, sorry, let me back up. And full compliance
I'm using
with-
your memo, Janet.
I know, I'm
It was
looking
really
at it.
good.
Hold
Okay.
on, hold on, hold on. Full compliance with the easements, which was not Dick's. So right now, the only thing that is out of compliance with the easements is the audited financial statements. So for all intents and purposes, that is the same item. However, the wording would be different if we include all covenants of the easement agreements. Eric?
So point of information, if they're already in full compliance, is 2 and 3 moot? And, because if they're already in full compliance, they're already in full compliance.
I think it's a
So-
comfort thing, so they are in
So I,
compliance.
so I don't,
So-
so I don't understand the point of this amendment. It doesn't
I don't know.
do anything.
Explain, or, yeah, I mean, maybe Susan
I
can.
don't understand.
Susan?
So they're not in compliance.
With the easement.
agreement,
But
right?
they're in compliance with previous grant agreements, and they're in compliance with the park protection guidelines. I think that's what Eric was talking about.
Yes.
Is that what you were asking?
Yeah, I was referring to 2 and 3.
Or be in
So
compliance with
the
audits.
previous grant agreements and the park protection agreements, if they're already in full compliance, it seems that this amendment is a moot point. Because once they provide, one, the audited financial reports, then 2 and 3 is already met, so what's the point of this amendment?
So let's, then you can feel free to vote no to the amendment. So let's move on and take a vote on the amendment unless you have something new to add, Jeff.
I just wanted to clarify that the reason there were 3 pieces originally, when we talked about it at the work session, the idea was that they would be in full compliance with every agreement that is in place with CA. So that was the idea, to make sure that in general, they were in compliance with everything that any agreement with CA, and those were explained as the different agreements, so it was just further explained in detail. If they are in agreement with the other two, then I don't know that it's necessary. If Susan says that they're in compliance with the other two, but that was the idea behind it, is that they're in compliance with any agreements with CA, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
and so the question I
Okay,
have,
can we call it a question on the amendment?
Well, I'm trying to understand if she's agreeing, then she withdraw her.
It's Tina's amendment to withdraw,
Well,
so
is
if
she
you want to
withdrawing
talk
her
to somebody.
second? I'm not clear.
No, I'm not.
Oh, there's no
okay.
second.
All right, can I comment on it?
If you have something new to add, yes. If not, let's just vote on it and move on.
I think it's very clear to me that we don't know what we're talking about with that amendment, and I am not going to vote for something when we're not clear what exactly the implications are. There's a good chance that the trust will never get any money with that amendment, so that's my position.
Okay, I'm going to do a roll call vote. Andy?
Ashley has her hand up and has had for a while and hasn't spoken.
Okay, so you guys need to help me out because I can't look at my notes and look at the screen, so.
Okay.
Great. I just had a quick question, and this is probably for Susan. So in terms of these amendments, I'm curious about the disbursement of the funds and if they're dispersed all at one time, and if these amendments basically just encourage or require IAT to stay within compliance the entire time along the disbursement schedule.
Good question.
So I think one of the reasons that they are here is because when you all discussed this last time, we didn't know for sure. So we then validated that, right? So this is at a snapshot in time as written, and it would be, so right now, yes, there's compliance. Would that be true when the other terms are met? I think it would be worth validating that again and keeping these in here until that time comes.
Because the disbursement comes later, correct?
Well,
right.
when these audited reports are finished and received.
So they would need to still be in compliance with these other two.
I think so.
I agree. That makes sense. That they
Susan,
have
do you
all
want to?
three.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, no, go ahead.
Okay, let's call it.
I was just going to say, clarify that a grant agreement is written that has a term.
Oh,
I think that's part of
right.
Ashley's question.
Oh, okay, so
Well,
yes,
that
there would
wouldn't
be a grant
change,
agreement? We do with every disbursement, there's been a grant agreement.
But what I'm saying is previous grant agreements, the status of those is not going to change between now and when this money is
Right.
dispersed. So
No,
that one is
only the
irrelevant.
park guidelines,
The
right?
number 3-1,
Right.
yeah.
Okay.
That's a kind of question. Sorry.
Yeah. So Ashley, did you get the answer to your question?
Yeah, I'm good. So it sounds like the third bullet, it's possible for keeping it on there because we want to ensure that they're still in compliance at the time of disbursement, if for people that are voting for or against that amendment.
Okay, is everyone clear on what we're voting on?
No.
Okay. Yeah, I have, actually, just to that third amendment, is that the one about maintaining park policies, maintenance policies?
Protection, yep.
Right, that's an ongoing thing that we do as the trust. You know, we look at that daily. You could be momentarily out of compliance if, say, IMA decides to put its trash on our parking lots again. That kind of thing. We could be out of compliance due to somebody else's action that we can't control, that then we have to correct. And we are very quick at correcting them, but, you know, we're talking about possible conditions
Yeah,
that
please.
can't be controlled.
I'm
Can we
sorry.
move on and vote?
Well,
on this
it's not even that. Lynn is speaking on behalf of the Inner Arbor Trust
You know what?
while she's
Let's
serving as a
vote.
CA
It's
board.
Totally.
Remember,
I call the
and
question.
that's the point of it.
Call the
All right,
question.
I am calling a roll call vote. Andy, on the amendment, sorry. The amendment,
Tina's amendment?
Tina's amendment. That is the only amendment on the table. Tina's amendment includes all 3 points.
Oh, all right. I'll vote yes.
Sherry,
No.
Ginny,
No.
Dick,
No.
Lynn,
No,
Tina,
Yes.
Jess,
Yes.
Eric,
no,
Ashley,
Yes.
and I vote no. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 against, 4 in favor. Amendment loses.
Okay, just clarification question.
Jenny?
I'd just like to be really clear on what we're left with Dick's amendment. Did you say?
It's not an amendment, it's a motion.
I mean, your motion, I'm sorry. Did you say what would the responsibility of the Inner Harbor Trust would be produce audited FY19, FY20, FY21?
That is correct.
Okay, and then what was actually in Janet's thing that I thought was very good, it said that the IAT will develop a plan for implementing the audit for FY22, period. That's all it says. Is that what you said?
That's
Okay.
That's correct.
Okay.
That is included, Dick?
Yes.
Okay.
Which is basically the first
The
section.
first, it's number 1.
It's
Of
what,
that?
it's what Janet had.
Okay.
Yeah, let's just make it clear. I mean, it's what the first.
Here,
page,
I will
right?
read it out
Okay.
loud for us.
Thank you.
It is full compliance with the terms of the amended and restated Declaration of Restrictive Covenants and Easement Agreement dated March 14, 2014, otherwise known as the Easement Agreement, most notably addressing the lack of compliance with the requirement for audited financial statements. CA must be in receipt of Inner Harbor Trust audited financials for 19, 20, and 21. And Inner Harbor Trust must provide an estimated timeline for the completion of fiscal year 2022 audited financials. Any questions on that? Any discussion?
Yeah, I don't know about the first two sentences, just the two that I gave.
It is the
what I-
easement agreement. The only thing they're out of compliance is the audited financial statements.
Well, I hate to put anything else in it but the audit.
That's okay.
Calling to question. I'm going to do a roll call vote. Dick?
Yes.
Lynn?
Yes.
Tina?
Yep.
Jess?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Ashley?
Yes.
I vote yes. Andy?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Ginny?
Yes.
Okay, vote is unanimous. Motion passes. Thank you. Okay, now we can move on to board discussion. So number 7A, Minority Business Enterprise Program Policy Provisions. Dick,
I have a question.
on this policy?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Are we going to go through it first?
I think that's probably
Okay,
best.
fine. I'll hold my question.
So just to refresh everyone's memory, in January, the January.
Susan, are you intending to share your screen? Because it's not up on the,
It's not in the meeting?
I can't, can those of you online see the presentation?
Nope.
Okay, I'll get my technical support, but in the meantime, so in January 27, the board voted to extend the Mbe policy for 10 years, and at the same time to request that CA staff return in March with some additional, some provisions to the policy and other recommendations. And at that time also, a board subcommittee was established, and that was Tina, Ashley, and Sherry Zaret. So Tina and Ashley and I and Pat O'Malley, our Director of Purchasing, met. Thanks, Lynn. And to discuss some information shared by the subcommittee, our existing policy, and then to talk about terms and possible other considerations. So I thought we had a great discussion that evening, and we did some follow-up research. So we developed a chart and a timeline for an overall increased goal, and also for sub-goals by categories of MBEs. And we did some research into that. We have, I think he's saying I'm good to go. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. So I just wanted to point out that context, so when the policy was established years ago, we modeled it closely on Howard County's program to take advantage of that infrastructure that existed there and not duplicate those efforts. So it was so we follow, we work closely with them, we access their resources, access their list of vendors, and the Howard County policy does not have sub-goals. Now, the state of Maryland does, and they're all further broken down at the state level into industry classifications, and we don't think that makes sense for CA. Just that, I think we're too small. There's no, kind of guarantee that we would be purchasing along those lines, and it just is an added record-keeping and tracking burden. So, based on those considerations and our discussion and research, this is what we've developed or what we're proposing. So the overall goal...
Sorry, Susan, to interrupt you again. It's not progressing on the screen.
Here, I'll fiddle with it while you talk.
Okay.
Because this is out of the memo that's
It's in the memo,
packet,
yeah.
just
We have it in the
right.
memo, so... What we did, so we have the overall goal, we were at 12, the goal is 12% now, we're moving to 15, 18, 20, and 23 over a period of a few years. But where we came up with the sub-goals, and that would be on the next slide, is based on the population of Howard County's MBE firms. So we got the list from the Office of Equal Business Opportunity Office, and as Mr. Howell noted, and because we talked today, there are, let's see. Find my notes. Well, almost 45% of the MBE firms in Howard County are African-American owned. So almost 9%, 8.8 are Hispanic American, and so on down the list. So what we proposed was applying that proportion to the overall goals. So in the first year, for example, we would say 7% of CA spend, almost half of the total goal, would be with African American owned vendors, and then moving from 8 to 9 to 10%. So this way, it's proportional to the population of vendors in our community, and reflects, those opportunities.
Can I ask a question on that? So do we base this on dollar amount? It's like, do we base what we would consider our percentages on the dollar amount spent?
Dollars,
Okay.
right, and then track the number of firms, but we would base it on spend.
Uh-huh.
Right.
Sorry, is it okay to ask questions now, or would you
Sure.
prefer? Okay. So if, so these are very specific percentages, so obviously it can be a little bit difficult to track to those. Would we have ranges that, so, for instance, if you have a contract that's larger that ends up going to one that is then disproportionately represented, how are we going to account for that?
It would show up as being disproportionately
Okay.
represented.
Dick, and then Tina, and then Eric.
I'm really pleased with this program. I think this is a great idea. I think these are terrific goals. As you know, over the past 10 years, we've had goals in mind, and we haven't met them. So I'm just wondering, how are we going to enforce this? How are we going to make sure we make these goals? Who's going to be responsible for them? Are there any consideration of who is going to have to do the heavy lifting here? And the second thing is, I know a lot of it is just outreach. I mean, it's just making sure that the ads are in the right places and going out and talking to firms. And I'm just wondering if there are any other incentives that we're going to employ, or are there any other things that we're going to do to help get those firms in compliance?
So we would definitely continue to increase our outreach. We've made some significant improvements in that over the past 10 months. participating in the state, the county, there are regional events, and we've participated in those to a higher level than we have in the past. And just working also one-on-one with vendors. We're meeting one-on-one with vendors to encourage them to do business with us and to work with us. And just continuing to look for vendors that are, in these categories of business that we're doing.
Well, is there anybody cracking the whip here? Are we, how are we, I mean, like I said, we did not make these goals in the past, and I want to make them in the future. So where's the accountability?
So the accountability, this is an organizational goal. Everyone has to participate. So it's a much higher priority for the organization than it was previously. So the attention that Lakey's applied to diversity efforts is a big part of this.
And other than outreach, there are really no specific incentives or anything, special conditions?
We can't do incentives per se, but so the key is outreach and engagement and meeting people and working with smaller vendors and
Okay.
really.
Okay, well, let's hope we can make those.
Tina?
Thank you. I did want to, I have two questions. I wanted to draw attention again to what Mr. Howell said about, perhaps looking at increasing these goals based on the population of the county, not just the number of businesses. And so I want us to make sure that we pay a lot of attention to what he's saying. And I also wanted to ask about the women non-minority category that we have here. We talked a lot about in our subgroup meeting. We talked a lot about, for example, African American. Some of us think that should be counted in both categories. That should be counted in African American businesses and women-owned businesses because some people straddle more than one category. Will we have the data systems to be able to track that?
I don't know that we will, because the firms are certified in one or the other category. So they're identified for us in one or the other. So I'm not sure we would be able to dig any deeper into that. But we'll continue to look at that, and that may change over time. I don't know.
That's only if we're using the county designations, right? Not necessarily the state or federal?
Right.
Because I know federal will do multiples.
Yes. Okay.
And so I would want to offer that again as a data source to consider.
Did you have a second question, Tina?
Just about to raise to raise the question that Mr. Howell raised about the population of the county.
Okay.
As a consideration instead of the count of businesses.
So if I may, I don't know if this helps at all. So the population, if we could move to the next slide. So this is the breakdown of the Mbe firms in the county at almost 45% African Americans. So that's how we took 45% of the 15% goal, for example. Now we could, if we base that on the population, it would be 25%. So of the goal is the way I would think the math works. But this is a board program, so you could guide us.
So Tina, did you catch that? If we go by population, they actually get less representation than more.
I'm going to circle back and I'll come back to that question.
Okay. Eric, you're up.
A quick question on those percentages. Is that a percentage of number of firms or a percentage of dollars?
Number of firms.
So So I guess, and the second question I have is, do these percentages line up with the CA's current percentages for the MBE program, or are they different?
So we don't have sub-goals now.
Oh, they don't.
No, and because the county doesn't. This is us, creating that, situation, so. Not sure what you're asking.
So I mean, basically, if we were to take the same ratio and we were to look at the ratio for each demographic that we're currently have in our current MBE program, are those ratios the same as what we're seeing on the screen, or are the CA ratios different?
Right.
If they're different, should we be using the CA ratios? Because I imagine CA uses a different subset of businesses in the county and different set of trades in the county.
Probably to some degree, but I think we align in a lot of ways. But so we don't track. We don't have sub goals right now. So our spend is. I think we have a higher proportion of women-owned, non-minority spend than this represents. So this would be an advance for us. This would be moving us to a more diverse population of spend.
And I guess the third question I have is, if our metric we're using is based on percentage of number, which is the HOCO MBE, that percentage there, should we be using also number in our metric, or should we be using dollars?
Well, we would report both. Typically, I think the more meaningful is the spend, is the actual investment in partnership with those with the vendors, as opposed to just picking just the number of vendors. Now, we used the numbers to come up with the percentages because that's the data we could get. Like I said, the county doesn't have sub goals, so we didn't have access to that data.
Sherry?
I think Ashley's had her hand up.
Yeah, I have her in the queue. She's after Sherry.
Thank you. Yeah, I really would like to thank you, Susan, for the work that you've done on this and the leadership from Lakey on this topic. I think this is something that we've really, looked at. It was great to work with Tina and Ashley. We had very productive meetings. And I think looking at the way that the feds do it, because they have expanded this kind of program over time. They've got a lot more experience over time. And there are some consulting firms, many consulting firms in Howard County. A lot of them are going through the federal registry. So we have to think not only about those companies that might be registered with Maryland, but there's also federal registration that might expand our base of people to contact. So I wouldn't want to exclude anyone because we have so many people who contract in the Washington area. So that's something for us to think about. Right. Also, when we examine the current data that we had, in terms of categories, I think Eric's point is well made, that CA has different kinds of requirements for procurement and for contracting than the county might have. But I think we need to be sensitive over time to make sure that we are not clustering in a particular category. That, for example, African American is not all going into open space, which has been traditionally where it's been. I think, so that's the kind of thing that I think will ultimately end up coming out in an annual report. And when we talked about, where to place it, if September is the best date for you, I think that would work great. And that way we know that we're going to be gathering that information at a time that's possible for you to do it. And then we can look at that over time with what you've already started to shape here. So you've given us a really good structure to begin with, and with these subcategories. So thank you for working on that.
Well, it was a group effort, obviously.
I just want to note, Sherman, I see your hand, but unfortunately, we are now in the board portion of the meeting, and we can no longer accept resident questions at this time.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Okay, Ashley and then Lynn.
Yes, so I completely echo what Sherry said. It was great working with you all for, expanding this program. I'm excited that we're going to be able to have these sub goals. This was clearly part of like best practices in larger organizations that are working to make sure that the revenue is, being spread around to different groups. One thing that I forgot to mention before I went on vacation was I think it's worth adding somewhere in here, assuming that we're going to keep sub goals with this program, and ideally this program is only going to grow larger as time goes on, that we reassess what the percentages are, because obviously our county makeup will change, and so will the registrations with the Mbe firms within Howard County and the state and federal, right? So I think finding some way to make sure that we're double checking and not misrepresenting as we slowly start to change what our makeup is will be important. And then in terms of, Dick had asked the question about like how we're going to make sure that we're keeping up with this. It's, I think, adding the reporting to it. We tend to monitor what we manage or manage what we monitor. The fact that the board's going to have insight on this and looking at it every year will give it that view, and the fact that there are people that are, watching this board meeting right now and going out and talking to other community members. The word of mouth will be a big make a big effort, and the grassroots effort involved in all of us telling people that know small business owners is going to make a really big difference with that too, right? Like Columbia Association wants to work with you. We want to have your business, and that message will go a really long way.
Thank you. We have Lynn, Ginny, Tina, and then Lakey.
My question is, I think, partially answered. Ashley asked the same thing. I was just wondering how often the data would be reviewed, because again, the county's changing daily, and Columbia especially, again.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea that to do that. We did not contemplate that, and that's really smart. We should. So I would, annually would be probably as rapidly as it would change in any meaningful direction.
Thank you. Ginny?
Yeah, Susan, can you give us an idea of how many contracts we gave last year? And which departments would they be in?
In total?
Yeah.
I'd have to get back to you.
I mean, is it, or if there's a range like 10, 20, because we mostly have full-time and part-time employees, right?
Well, I think, yes, but we have many contracts for multiple services or goods as well, so.
Okay.
I don't.
Okay,
We can report back at this is going to be discussed again, I think.
Yeah, I'm just curious about what type of contracts we really have. Okay, I can guess at a few, but, okay.
Well, in the Q3 report, let's see. So during the quarter, we had 466 purchase orders. Now some have contracts, some do not. And the dollar amount of those was $8.1 million. So if you look at, well, even just those over $75,000, it's quite a list. I mean, it's equipment, there are electrical services. An MBE vendor is our supplier of Google licenses, of all things. And so,
okay.
But it's an array, and every quarter you can see the ones that are over 75,000 reported.
Okay, thank you.
Which is a good snapshot.
Tina?
Thank you. Don't hold me to the date, but I think that staff gave us that information. I want to say it was either July or August.
Yeah.
A past look into the spending and the types of spending and the firms associated with each one. So I think we have that in some of our documents from this past year. I also want to just echo Sherry and Ashley's words about, working together and working with the staff. And I have a lot of confidence in Lakey's emphasis and leadership in this area. And I think that we will begin to see things changing for the better going forward, and looking forward to regular reviews of the information and the progress as the organization and the community change and grow.
Thank you. Lakey?
A couple of my points have been made. I just wanted to echo, as Susan just referenced, so we do report this out quarterly, now, and my understanding is for years.
Just the total.
The total.
Spend, right.
And so, obviously getting a more drilled-in view, but I do want to make clear that it has been reported for quite some time. In terms of accountability, I think we have to, if this is a priority organizational goal, which the board sets, I think the board needs to have it on the agenda, review it, in the board meeting setting, and really check in as those reports are given out. So I think this body has a lot to do with accountability. I feel very positive about the strides that we've made in the time that I have been here. And I just wanted to echo one thing that Susan brought up. To be clear, this is being talked about across the organization, not as a purchasing program. I mean, this is something that I am making the effort across each and every department. Purchasing is making the same effort to go to each of our leaders that are making these purchasing decisions, that are talking to vendors, that are doing the outreach. That has to get embedded across the organization. And I think we've made strides in that. But the reporting, I think, I have a little bit of concern on, as this was done, because again, it was a board initiation of wanting to adjust the policy, that as we drill into the numbers, and I guess, Janet, this was kind of to your earlier point, we can parse them out so much that we don't have a lot of ability to be flexible. And my experience in even launching MBE programs with governments, the focus is on the spending, the focus is on engagement, and the focus is on making sure that as a practice, we are thinking first and foremost, are we getting the word out to a multitude of types of vendors? And I think that if we embed that, that's really where we're going to make progress. So I'm committed to that from a leadership perspective. But I just wanted to echo that the board, placing this on the agenda and really looking at these numbers and staying abreast on them, I think is an imperative step as well.
Thank you. Eric?
Yeah, the question I have is, so we're going from, the goal is to go from the current 12% all the way up to 23% in 4 years. And if I recall the past data points, they sort of bounced around between 7 and 14. Mm-hmm. The question I have is, how do we know that this is a realistic goal?
Well, we think it is, and I think you'll see that we're already starting to improve. And I think it's realistic also because it's Howard County's achieving 20%, and the state's goal is 23 for small businesses. So, I think we try it, and we throw our all into it and see. But we will only know by making the efforts, I think.
Well, and let's be agile, right? We set a goal, and if we don't achieve it, then we look at how we can continuously improve until we get there. So. Any further discussion on this? Andy?
Yeah, just one thing. So I expect that this will probably come up for a vote in April.
April 28th meeting, we'll have one more discussion on it.
Yeah. So I think for me, it would be a good idea if you could take your recommendations and actually incorporate them into the Mbe policy and show us where the changes are. And that way I kind of will have an actual idea of what changes we are making. Oh, here's we're going to have the reporting. I mean, I like it all and it's all very good. But right now I'd be a little bit lost if I tried to make a motion as to exactly what are we adding. So if you could just kind of incorporate it in to show what the new policy would look like, I think it'll just be easier for me.
So I appreciate that. Thank you. I should have said that at the beginning.
Okay.
That's what we were thinking, that out of this discussion, we would, for the next one, do a track changes or red line policy.
Yeah, track changes. Mm-hmm. But great job. Great job to all the committee members.
All right, any additional? Okay. Okay, next up for discussion is grants policy. So this one came up in our last meeting around what our grant policy is. the process that we follow. And tonight we have allocated 30 minutes to discuss it. So the idea being here, are there things, keep in mind, the budget is set for the next fiscal year, so this is not impacting that, but this will impact how we budget for grants beyond that point. So hopefully everyone has read this document, basically broken into the 3 sections and the different types of grants that we have provided in the past. Is there anything anyone would like to share or ask on that one? Jess?
Yeah, so first of all, I think in the meeting we were at earlier in the week, you talked about how now grants are falling under the president's office. Is that correct, Lakey? And it's changed where, I guess my question is, who's responsible for implementing this policy?
So currently, the one that is in front of you is dated February 2020. And so we've made no changes. You'll see a former staff member is cited because we didn't send any of this out.
Right.
Because we did not put grants, community grants in the FY23 budget, only the Ann Arbor Trust grant. So it has not been touched since that time. So my understanding was the discussion was, or as I understood the intention, the discussion was, let's look at the grant policy prior to the next time that we put it out. So my general thought is that that would be, summer or fall, depending on the budgeting process. So with that said, right now, the way that we have done the realignment, we put the idea of the grant policy management under the president's office. That is accurate, but I just wanted to clearly state there are no grants.
No, that's fine.
That I am managing.
So that was my first question, but one of the reasons that I wanted to look at this, and I'll say right now that I think my concerns about the current policy as it stands are more around process and requirements than they are around the policy itself. So I don't want to get too into the weeds because operations, right, is not what we do. But I do think that I would recommend that we make some changes to the application and to the reporting process to make it a little more stringent, in the sense that, I came up with a list of things, because I apply for grants all the time, things that are typically required in a grant application are the most recent audited financials, the most recent board-approved Form 990, a copy of the project budget and the annual operating budget, depending on what the grant's for. Sometimes they ask for who are your top 5 funders or donors, proof of 501c3 status, and then I have had some grantors who insist that you have at least a bronze level profile on GuideStar. So I would like to see us moving more, since we're stewarding assessment dollars, right? I want to make sure that we're doing our due diligence with every organization, just to make sure that we're getting all the information on the front end, so money's not going out the door without us having an assurance that we're working with a nonprofit that is going to be able to hold themselves accountable.
Dick and then Tina.
Jess, I think you raised some good points there, and that was a lot of the thinking that went into this when it was originally created 2 years ago. The thing is, we did not want to have to, as a board, analyze every single grant request that came in. And that's why we decided to turn to the foundation, the Columbia Foundation, and let them do all of the scut work on these and come up with organizations that fulfilled our necessary standards. And we would give the foundation a big block grant. We'd have one of our staff people on their grant board. And that would just take a lot of the scut work out of it for the organization. And all these questions did come up at the time that we hashed out this policy. And believe me, we spent a lot of time on it, trying to simplify it as much as possible. So the thing is, the big ones, and we know these organizations, would be board directed, and the community grant program would be handled outside by experts. And then there are things that come up during the course of the year all the time, and that would be to the discretion of Lakey or whoever the CEO is, so that we could cover these things if there were emergencies or special events. So that was the thinking behind the whole policy. And I agree, we would want a whole lot more information for some of these little grants, and we've got an organization that's going to do that for us.
Well, I would argue that we should have a lot more information about the bigger grants. So I guess my concern is really with category 1, board directed, because we have had, granted, it's been a while, right, since we haven't been giving out grants, but we have had organizations come directly to the board, right, and request larger amounts of money. So I think there needs to be some way, and again, operations not, but that somebody is doing that work behind the scenes to vet those and either make a recommendation or say, yeah, they've checked all the boxes. So you guys, the board can decide if they want to fund this, but we know that they've, done this and this and this and this before it comes to the board. So I'm not exactly sure, again, how that works, but I think the key is making sure that, particularly for those big sums of money, that we are getting all this detailed information before we grant funding.
Tina?
When I was at Enterprise, and Enterprise put out literally millions of dollars in grants each year, they did something much more like what Jess described. And I would also include articles of incorporation on that list, and if the organization has any bylaws.
Tina and Jess, if you could send your list of suggested, I think it would be helpful to see it in writing. So this clearly will come up again, and this is our first conversation. But
yeah.
Okay, we have Ginny, then Lynn, then Eric, and then Lakey.
Yeah, actually,
Andy's hand was up.
Oh, sorry.
That's
Andy.
okay, I'll go after Lee.
I gotcha.
Okay, actually, I agree with one of the things Jess said, that I think the grant should only be given to nonprofit organizations. And that's not clear. No, it's actually, if you read it, it's not clear at all. For example, category 3, unless I missed it, it's not limited to nonprofits. Okay.
That's it. Okay, Lynn?
Yeah, I used to chair the Columbia Foundation, and we developed a number of different grant-making policies over the years. We had a lot of, and I'm assuming this would be what would come in under the community grant category, smaller startup organizations that would come looking for some kind of help that certainly would not have all of the background material. Now, we can just simply say that we don't deal with startups or with struggling, Again, a lot of these community groups are struggling. They get to a make it or break it kind of situation. So I don't know how we set policies for that. I'm looking at like people that come in $5,000. I'll take an example, Fern. They don't exist, they've worked. We need something desperately now. Is this what this community category would be, or what would I'd like to define what that would be for, and what percentage of grant, how much grant money are we expecting to give? What percentage would be in each of these 3 categories? Is there any way to, I think we should look at the whole structure of it first. Yes, definitely, big grants should require lots of information. $25,000 is, is still a big grant for most people. I would like to look at these categories a little more, perhaps discuss them, refine them a bit.
Eric, Lakey, Andy, Sherry, and then me.
Yeah, I'd like a little bit more, I think we should have a little more detail on how we establish the total amount of funding, especially for 2 and 3. So the board obviously directs 1, but 2 and 3, how much, what's going to be the total amount of grant money available? Is that going to be based on the number of grants that are pre-selected by the president, or because there could be a lot of them, and that could get, that could add up to a fairly high dollar figure. So I'd like to sort of establish a process for establishing what that grant cap would be.
Definitely.
Lakey?
So just real quick, I mean, Eric, the process is the budget process, the annual budget process. So the board would allocate funds in the budget in each of those categories. I mean, that's my understanding of how it would work, right? So I was not here when this was developed, so, I had to ask questions internally about how this has worked. And my understanding is CA never has taken the position of doing a true, open call, open bid, request for proposals, we have X amount of dollars, right? So when I read this, it seemed very much like some general guidance for individual grants that, I guess, kind of as Dick described, that might come up in this kind of other category. There was some thought to go towards the community foundation, and my understanding is that happened, given the adoption of the policy kind of almost right before COVID. So that never exactly, rolled out.
It's been
So, yep.
longer.
And so all that to say that I think that if the board is going to kind of take this up as a discussion point of what do we want to achieve in the grant policy, the real question I would have as staff is, what do we actually want to incent? Because when I read this, I don't necessarily understand, do we want more of X in the community? Do we want to fill Y gap? And that's really, what I see as the board role. And then again, operationally, maybe we do a grant call because of that and we do micro grants, or maybe we do, a different approach. But when I read this, I didn't, again, we're not implementing it this fiscal year, so this was, has not been a priority for me, but since the board was going to be discussing it, I at least wanted to bring that up, that some of that structure of what is the goal, because I could make almost any organization that would approach CA could fit into the idea of arts and culture, human services, education, environment. I mean, almost every one, right? So what's really our goal there? So I don't know if we would change that annually, but I at least wanted to bring that up as a point of discussion.
Andy?
Yeah, I was going to say, I remember this discussion. It was not pleasant. This was a nasty decision, and we finally settled on this. But I think part of it was what the board wanted is the board wanted out of the grant business. Like, we did not want to sit here and decide. What we wanted to do was reserve the right to do the large grants, but turn everything else over to either the foundation or the president's office. And as you said, just simply set a number in the budget. This year we're going to do X to community foundation. This year we're going to just set aside and maybe Y for the president to do little grants. But the big thing for the board was simply, I think, the community, the big grants that kept coming in year after year that were very controversial, lots of discussion. So I think we need to stay with that, get the board out of everything else, and just focus on the amounts, and if we want to give the large amounts, at the board.
That makes sense.
Okay, Sherry?
Yeah, thank you for that review. And, yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, and just to give some background here, when I was chair, I remember reviewing with the president the small grants that went out. And that's exactly what it was. It was an emergency situation. It was something came up where somebody came up short, or a need arose in the community, and we were trying to be good citizens. And I think that's kind of the impetus here, to be good citizens, to be able to fill in a gap, to be able to respond to an emergency situation. And that is a role that CA has played very positively in the community. So I think you got the idea with that. And the Community Foundation, I feel very confident in terms of how they go about doing their analysis. I don't think there's a whole lot of stuff that we have to break down because they're in the business. They've been doing it a long time. They've got a great track record. We felt very confident working with them. And it removed a lot of staff time and a lot of other stuff that was distracting to the board from other types of strategic things that the board had to be looking at. So this policy really simplified things a lot for the board. Now, we never really got to see it in working condition, as you said, but I think it's worth seeing how it works, given the structure that we have.
Thank you. I'm next up. I was also going to add to Andy's historical. So, I mean, one of the things that came up was the recurring grants. Like, there were certain organizations that just assumed that CA would be providing their funds every year. And so that was part of the discussion around, there were two camps of thought on that one. And that, one was this shouldn't be maintaining an organization necessarily, or, should it be if it's a service that we value? So that was one of the things. The other thing that came up at that time, though, was the timing of it, because, to your point, Lakey, it seems more fair to have a call to, call for grant funding. The challenge came in later in the year. If someone came in with a great request, do we have some sort of reserve, or, that kind of thing? And so there was conversation around that. And I mean, we did not come, clearly no timing made it into this policy, but that was one of the things that we had come up with. And, I wonder if we as a board, the other piece that we kind of talked about but didn't really dive into was around, are there certain types of organizations that we would be interested in supporting? And I think, Sherry, to your point, if we're handing a lump sum over to a grants organization, then, we would hope that that sort of provides a well thought out plan for how those grants are funded. But, I think particularly for category 3, were there things that we want to provide, like, hey, we think that we should have some percentage, blah, blah, blah. And then, speaking of percentages, final point was, we had talked about an idea of, do we look at some percentage of something, whether that be income, whether that, some obviously manageable percentage, but do we base it on what we are bringing in, which, would, and this was pre-COVID conversation, but obviously that would have been a good conversation to have, because if you're bringing in a lot less, then you'd want to make sure your grant assessment was following suit. So that was my reminiscent. I got you in the queue. So Dick, you're up next.
Yeah, I echo Andy. It was very contentious. And the thing is, this is a much more disciplined approach than what we had before, but it's full of compromises. And the compromises really had to do with situations that existed 2 years ago and probably don't exist anymore. And this could be tightened up quite a bit. And I think when, sometime 6 months from now, when we start worrying about the next budget, we might want to re-examine this, or it might be part of what we re-examine when we re-examine the entire policy book. But this thing came out kicking and screaming, and it was the best we could do at the time. So, let's look at it. I don't think we have to really do anything about it in the immediate future.
Eric?
Yeah, so my comment is, so we got 3 different categories here, and I imagine the board might want to set 3 different caps for each of these categories. But and going back to Lakey's point that the board sets this in the budget, but if I look at the budget, there's really only one line for grants. There's basically temporary funding and grants expense, so it all gets summarized on that line. So would it make sense going forward to have 3 lines in the grants category that covers each of these categories?
So what we did, rather than getting to that level of detail, we had a chart on that page in the budget where the narrative is and listed them. So it was clear there, but not burdening the general ledger with another, set of.
Okay, thanks.
Jess?
Yeah, so going back to Lakey's point about having some direction around, that right now the way it reads is very general and almost any organization could say anything. I like the idea of making it align with our strategic plan and our strategic goals. That's a pretty common thing. How does this meet the goals that our organization is trying to reach, and is there a gap that's being filled there? And then the other piece, again, I just want to reiterate, I think this policy is great, except for I would like to see a little more clarification around the big grants. I think the community foundation and the smaller lump thing makes total sense. I don't see any need to change that. I think, and again, this just as a policy just outlines that this is a category that we decide, but I think it's within that category. Where does that money go? How do people apply for those funds? Is there an open call? It's more of like an operationalizing it than it is the actual concept. So that's what I would like to see us dig into a little more, and I'll definitely send you the suggestions. And again, like I said, it depends on who's going to have to implement this, right? Like, I'm not trying to come in and be like, well, they need to do this, this, and this. Like, hopefully, whoever is going to be managing
I'm not
this,
volunteering.
right? So I'll make some suggestions, and then obviously, it would be up to staff to determine what the sort of application process and all that kind of stuff is. But I'm happy to assist in any way that I can.
Lynn?
Just a point of history. When Columbia was founded, one of the first things Jim Rouse decided was that he thought each business, each corporation that operated in Columbia should give 5% of their net profits annually to
All businesses.
the Columbia Foundation or whatever. No, but that was what, for instance, Equitable Bank was the first, the Columbia Bank was the first bank. They really started the Columbia Foundation, which is now the Community Foundation, and their 5% each year was essential for making it go. So that's just, it's a number from history, doesn't have to be applied, but, could be interesting.
Eric?
One last question. So we have category 1, which is 100K and up, and category 3, which is up to 25K. What's the policy for 25K to 100K?
We don't give them out. No, I mean, no, I'm not.
That's for real.
I'm not doing
Yeah,
it.
he's not kidding.
It basically was, the board directed, which were large amounts of money at that time, okay? And then there was the small, one-time type of, which was at the president's discretion, and I don't think it was ever more than like 25,000 in total. So, I mean, that was it. Everything else was going to go to the community grant, to the foundation to let them figure out. So we were worried about anything that was 100,000 or over, and we wanted to give the president some flexibility for these small little things that come in or used to come in on a regular basis. And then the thought is that the community foundation would actually handle any other type of grants. We'd send them off to the community foundation who had the whole process set up. So I know it sounds strange, but it was just like.
And to add on to that, the president's grants were generally 500 to 5,000 max. The only reason this policy specifies 25,000 is because we had an exception at the time we were discussing it that most people were in favor of. So that's really why it goes up to 25,000. But in theory, the idea was more like a $500 to $5,000 grant. All right, any other comments, questions? So this will be something that we'll discuss at a later date, but keep in mind, things that you'd like to see included. And we will revisit this probably later in the summer or into the fall. Thank you. All right. Okay, so next up, we have our financial reports and updates.
I was going to make a few general comments, though I know many of you do enjoy digging into the detail of the numbers. For those that don't, I wanted to just make a general statement that we are performing well ahead of budget and very proud of that and want to celebrate the team for that achievement. So even accounting for the employee retention tax credits, and additionally, one of the grants that we got in school age services, which again is due to actively, ongoing, creatively exploring what alternative income sources might be for CA. So that is the dedication that the team members are bringing, and we're obviously hitting those achievements much to the benefit of CA's bottom line. But we would still be ahead of budget even without those factors. And that is pretty freaking amazing, particularly, still emerging, hopefully, from the pandemic. So just wanted to highlight that is based on, from my observation, really continued process improvement that I think came out of necessity during COVID, but really has become a muscle that is being flexed across a lot of teams, everything from reducing paper, but really streamlining a lot of it. I think in a lot of ways we are right-sized as an organization. There are a couple of teams that do need to hire, and I want to be very clear about that, and they are pretty much only on Dan's team. But we do have some, there are real hiring challenges that we are dealing with, but largely right-sized. We absolutely have, ongoing supply chain challenges that probably hit our capital budget more so than our operating budget, but just wanted to really focus on the positive outlook and note that the ERTC money, the employee retention is focused on just that. So we were able to do all of this performance inside operational dollars for COVID repayment. And then we finally did get some Federal CARES Act funding. And in doing so, we're going to be able to do some bonuses to employees that were here during that time, as well as proposing, some unexpected addition to the cash reserves, which really shows an investment in CA's stability as an employer for employees to be able to weather circumstances in the future. So that is the non-financial detail explanation of how we're doing. Susan, if you will, take us through some of the detail. Thank you.
Sure. So I won't take a lot of time because I think, half of the board was, or close, was at the audit committee meeting. So we went through it in more detail. One thing I did want to point out, it's noted in the narrative, but the spiral bound, basically the P&L's book is now in the format of the realigned organization. So it matches the budget format and aligns now how the organization is performing, its operations. So we were able to get that done this quarter, which is great. So for the period, we're significantly better than budget for the period and expect to be year to date. We reflected the employee retention tax credits in the current estimate. We did not actually accrue them in the results for the period because of the uncertainty around them, and we did not get any notification. We got a check in February. So until we really saw something, it was just, it's a brand new program. It's very unclear. It was very unclear when we would get any funding, and or even, we believed we would. We felt we met the criteria, but we didn't know. So that's why we took a conservative approach on that. Also, as I still need to point out that $2 million of this variance is related to closing Haven on the lake, and that the favorable budget to actual variance of the accounting for that closure. So that's a non-cash transaction, and it will show up all year this year. And otherwise, I think the key thing to note, and I just want to emphasize, is the way the team is managing spending to revenues, especially under Dan's leadership, and just making sure that it's scaled properly from a spending, from a staffing, from just supplies. And I don't think the services are just as good. They get just as favorable, if not more favorable, responses on surveys, but the teams just really reset their management and spending, and I think that's excellent. So just looking forward, these are one-time programs, and the federal government already cut off the ERTC program a quarter earlier than anticipated, and but we are seeing significant price increases in things like, as you would expect, in our fuel costs, energy. We had a long-term contract for natural gas that we will have to renegotiate shortly as it expires, and we're not going to get these terms. And things like the pool painting costs, I mentioned that at the audit committee meetings, an example, it's just shocking price increases. Seeing price increases for on-call trades like electricians, HVAC, plumbers, and it's not just labor, it's supplies. They're just double-digit increases where we did not expect them. So, who knows? More to come on that as the year plays out. Overall, the organization is so proud of everyone, and just Lakey's leadership's been extraordinary, and so I hope that you all share that pride, and we're just really grateful. And I'm happy to entertain.
No, I was just going to echo that, because I think, the cross-functionality and the right-sizing of the organization and everything, all the attention paid to the details has obviously paid off, so thank you. Andy?
I will say that the audit committee did review all the financial reports for the third quarter. They were very impressed with the job, and they really wanted to extend their thanks to staff, Lakey and staff, for an excellent job that they did. And then the second thing that the audit committee discussed is there have been some changes to the general accounting standards, and they will be reflected in the next auditor's report, which will come out in July. So we went through them at the audit committee meeting, and just wanted to let the board know the audit report will look differently come July than what you've seen in previous years. So just be prepared. But it's, as I said, this is a national change at the general accounting standards.
The way it's been explained to me is there's going to be a lot more notes. And don't be alarmed, which normally the more notes there are, the more alarm you have. But they're trying to temper everyone, it seems. That's funny. It's a little nail biting, but okay.
Sherry?
Yeah, I just had a question about the Federal CARES Act funding, that $2 million that came in. Were there any requirements there for rehiring of previous staff?
No, there are not.
There wasn't?
No.
Okay, so that was really focused on whatever staff are currently in the organization and for retaining the staff that you have?
That's the intention, was to keep people on it was to help employers keep people on the payroll through the.
Okay, so that didn't have anything to do with procurement or any of these other consultants or any of that kind of stuff? Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, comments on the financials? Yay, nice to have a good news.
Yeah, exactly.
Good news portion of the agenda.
After the last 2 years.
Okay, next up we have I'm assuming we've covered all, right? Okay, I just wanted to make sure. That was quick. The dashboard.
So what I think, just in the interest of time and interest, honestly, Dan's got a really great new evaluation tool from Clarabridge, so.
So again, this year, it's the second year we've done it. Last January, for those that were around might remember, we did what we called a well-being survey, but it was really focused on COVID a lot and how people were handling COVID. But the response to the survey was so overwhelming, and I mean, the number of people who responded wasn't overwhelming. It was good, but just not. But what people were saying and how it connected with people was overwhelming. I had people replying back and telling me personal stories. And so working with our Clarabridge partners, we decided that every January going forward, we're going to do a well-being survey. And we did that again this past January, and it wasn't COVID focused. It was just more of a well-being, more focused survey, although we did get some operational feedback in there as well. But I'll just hit on some of the big highlights. In January, we still had the mask mandate, and people weren't happy about it. That was our top negative sentiment word. But sentiment in general, which is how people are speaking positive or negatively, it's a scale of -5 to 5, went from -0.08 the previous year to 0.38 this year. So it jumped up a bit, and people were feeling a little bit better overall. The effort score, which is how hard people think it is to do business with us, and we found that the mask mandates and the protocols were really kind of driving that up, or down as the case may be, because it's -5 to 5 again. Last year it was -2.3, which means it was pretty darn hard. People felt like it was just kind of a grind. A -0.69 this time, even with the mask mandate in place. So that was really, really good to see. One of the well-being questions we asked was about stress levels. I found this one a little bit interesting. 1 is very stressful and 5 was stressful. It went from 3.3 to 3.5. So it just moved a little bit, but we were in the middle of Omicron when we did this. And I'll talk a little bit more about stress because it's very age dependent, and that didn't change. And here's one that I wish I knew what it was before COVID. It's how big of a part of CA is your social life. And it stayed about the same from year to year, 2.6 to 2.7, or 2.7 to 2.6, so it's about even. But it would have been interesting to know what it was before to see how, where that point was. But it gives us a good place to start and really kind of, as we continue to work and expand things in the community. And a new question we asked this time was about communication and how people felt about our communication. Again, a 1 to 5 scale. We didn't ask it last time, so I don't have a comparison. But 3.7 was the average response. So people were generally happy. Those who weren't, generally the result revolved around the website, which Tim is working on. But the messaging and the general communications people were really happy with in the way we communicated. The thing that I'm the most proud of to see from this, because it goes back to what the team is doing. The question was asked if a staff member had exceeded your expectations. And if they did you remember their name? So we had almost 2 to 1 staff members exceeded someone's expectations versus they didn't exceed the expectations. And that's pretty amazing. And it was the number of people who remembered a name was astounding. But the key thing is, and we've talked about the Net Promoter Score before, is that if the member remembered the person's name, their Net Promoter Score was 72. Our average for the entire organization on our normal surveys is about 45. And about, the top producers are in the mid-50s. So, but if a staff member connected, exceeded expectations enough that the person remembered the 72, it only dropped to 69 if they exceeded their expectation, but the person didn't remember their name. But if they didn't think they met their expectations, it dropped all the way to 55. So pretty dramatic, and talks about connection and the importance of that community and connection and why people ultimately want to come back. But that's a tremendous job by the team to make that kind of connection in the midst of everything that's going on, wearing masks. It's hard to have conversations. It's hard to be close, but still being able to make those connections. And then just I'll touch on a couple more things. I talked about stress a little bit, and this didn't change. It's interesting year over year. The older you are, the less stressed you are. And as you get younger, your stress increases dramatically. And it's almost.
I'm pretty sure I don't agree with that, Dan, but.
It's almost the same curve. And just 58 was the average age for the fives on the stress, and 44 was the average age for the most stressed. 58 was the least stressed. 44 was the most stressed, was the average
Maybe
age.
by 58, I'll be less. Yes.
But that was interesting. It's kind of the same curve as last year, too, so that hasn't changed. The same swing. So we have to do some more things to figure out how to get those 40-somethings a little less stressed out there.
Let them retire.
I'm not sure that's
Really greatly lowers your stress level.
Meditation classes.
Welcome to Gen X. Yeah, no, the Gen Xers never get
But
to
that's,
retire.
you said that and you're laughing, but we did ask what kind of things people were looking for, what were their top goals for the year. Physical health and fitness goals were the top one, but number two was focus on my mental health. And depending on what survey you were done, I was just looking at a mind-body survey. Mind-body is a kind of a Spectrum SNG company for studios, and they did an aggregate survey, and their survey, mental health was number one. The other number one and number two, wherever you're at, it is a major challenge right now. And as we were kind of joking about the stress, but it's a big issue, and we're really trying to figure out and working with our medical advisory board and how we can really lean into that without our expertise, and so about how we can facilitate that. And
Dan,
then just
do you want to take questions, or do you
yeah,
want to wait till you
I
get?
can-
Tina, did you have a question on that topic? I mean, you can ask your question either way.
I want to second Dick's motion that 45 and 50-year-olds be allowed to retire, please.
So moved? No, just kidding.
Nothing valuable. Right now, I would just like to retire.
It's wonderful.
I don't know. Before I came here, I consulted, but in between my company being sold and getting back into consulting, I took some time off. And after about 4 weeks, I was like, God, I got to go back to work. Like, I was riding my bike all the time, but I'm like, even I can only ride my bike so much. So I'm not sure. Be careful what you wish for. And the last thing I'm going to note is, a couple of surveys ago, we started asking more specific demographic questions. And we talked about it, and the results were a little fuzzy. We were getting a lot of either the very straight answers or the prefer not to answer. And as people are getting more comfortable, we're starting to see. So I think as we ease into this, we're going to get a more representative look at as people get comfortable answering the questions. I will just say that even on the gender identity, because this stuck out to me as the biggest change, in the last survey, between all the categories of gender nonconforming, either male or female transgender, and other, we only had 3 responses. And in this survey, we had 6. So it's doubled. And just more people getting more comfortable answering. So I think it's going to take us a little bit of time for those to flesh out. But they're also giving us the ability eventually to start digging in deeply into how we can better serve more communities. So it's very pleasing to see people choosing to answer so that we can begin to better serve those communities.
Do we send the results of these surveys out to people? Because I don't think I've seen them.
No.
I'm just curious, like, I know it's anonymous, so like tracking,
It's not anonymous.
it's not, okay, so they provide email addresses. I was just curious if we sent them the results,
A
because I
lot of
think.
people think it's anonymous, but I send it to you, so
But
I
we've
know.
since debunked that here.
I know who sends them.
All I know is I get a note from Dan, and he's like, Lakey, do this survey. I'm like, what? Sending me a personal email.
But what we do is, when we make changes that are particularly based on the surveys, we wrap them into our newsletters. Because the surveys, even what I give you, the surveys really aren't designed to be used in this manner. They're interactive online tools.
Right.
So that's why when I give you the dashboard, you can't read it because it's really just, it's not designed to be looked at that way.
I was just curious in terms of feedback for people providing, like you respond, you like to see that you've contributed somehow.
Well, that's, we do, one of the bigger things, we put it out there, but the team actually goes through the surveys. And now we can't call everybody, but they spend a lot of time calling promoters, neutrals, detractors. Are there situations we can solve? Are there things we need more information on? Thank you for responding. So the team does a lot of one-on-one connections with people, but they can't do everybody.
For sure, yeah.
No, that's great. I'm glad you're providing it.
Well, I know my experience at the gym is always positive, so clearly the people behind the desk are, like, well, I mean, everyone in general, not just behind the desk. But. Any questions, comments? Yay, more good news. Go, Dan. All right, that wraps up the planned portion. We are on to questions only. Anybody have any questions?
Yeah.
Ginny?
Yeah, I just have one, and it's, like you said, Wes isn't here, but maybe we can get an answer to this. House Bill 93, that was Jen Teresa's bill. And in reading our summary, it says the bill does not directly impact the CA board. And I'm just asking, where did this amendment come from to the bill that completely changed House Bill 93 so that it really only applies to our village boards and the CA council? A candidate for election, this is 2B 106.3D. A candidate for election to a village board or the Columbia Council who is elected may not take office if the candidate has failed to file a report of donations and disbursements required under this section. So the bill, the plan was to change the bill so it only applied to that, and it was drafted by, and I had heard, and this is what I'd like to know more about, that our lobbyist was involved in that, and I'm just wondering why the disconnect from here. It doesn't apply, and then was our lobbyist actually working on this to get this amendment so that it did just apply to CA and the village boards? Now, obviously, the end result is it was any change would have been done so late that it was not going to go anyplace. It would have, if it was a Howard County bill, it would have to go back to the Howard County delegation, and they wouldn't have time to hold a hearing. So therefore, the bill would just sit in committee.
Can you be clear about what you're asking, though? I'm not
Yeah,
sure
I want to know if our lobbyist was involved in making this, working with this.
To make it specific.
Which I heard that may have been a possibility, but then here it's saying we're not involved. The bill doesn't directly. So this would imply that the bill does not directly impact the CA board. So it would be, yeah, we're just going to, kind of not be concerned about it. But this is an actual amendment that was asked to be drafted. So I'm just wondering what's the disconnect here? What was the?
So
what
I
happened?
can follow up and see, confirm your secondhand information of whether our lobbyists directly put that language in, and if so, what the guidance was.
Okay, thank you, yeah.
Ashley, Eric, and then Tina.
We can ask questions regarding anything. It wasn't just like upcoming topics, right?
Yep. Oh,
Great.
well, I mean, it's supposed to be questions regarding the list of things there, but
Yes.
I don't.
Yes.
It's kind of combination question / new topic. So last year, I'm asking this because it's sort of timely in that spring's coming here. Last year, I worked with Belinda at the sports park for planning the Midnight Mini Golf event, which was a well-attended 21 and up event. And there was some difficulty with acquiring a vendor that could serve alcohol. And I believe that went back to Columbia Association's policy. So it's possible that somebody that has been on the board for a while might be able to shed some light on this. But there is difficulty with getting vendors that can serve alcohol at Columbia Association events. What we were hoping to do was to get like a brewery like Black Flag or something local, but they required Columbia Association to apply for the one-day license. And so really my question is there a rule in place that prevents Columbia Association from doing that? You know, some policy, especially as we expand having adult-only events, because I know it's something that's going to be coming up this year repeatedly, and it would be good to get ahead of it.
Susan, do you know that off the top of your head? Do you want to address
I
it?
do not. I'd have to look into it, sorry.
We'll have to follow up on that one, Ashley.
Yeah.
Awesome, thank you.
It's whose land is it being held on? Is it CA property?
The sports park.
Right.
I don't think,
Oh,
right, but I
serve
think CA still has to decide whether they
Exactly.
intend to do that. Eric, and then Tina?
Yeah, so Jenny, on HB 93, does that only apply to candidates running for village board, not candidates running for CA or
You mean
Columbia
HB
Council?
93?
Yeah, HB 93. Did that change so it doesn't apply
No,
to?
the change applied to the CA council. That was the part I read.
Yeah, so that would affect the board.
Yeah, yeah,
I think that was the question.
Yeah,
yes.
That's what I want to clarify.
Tina?
I wanted to ask related to the IIT report, the latest status of the audited financials.
I think as soon as we know something about the audited financials, everyone will be informed.
Awesome, thank you.
Dick?
Yeah, I have a couple questions, but first of all, I'd like to thank you for your professional reading recommendations. The one on normalization of deviance, I thought was a very interesting article, and appreciate it. Two things in here that kind of hit me as I thought kind of interesting. We have a new tenant coming in or subtenant coming into the building. Anything you want to tell us about that, or?
Oh, we had talked about it when it was underway. Susan reported on that several months ago.
I wasn't aware of it, but.
Susan?
So we've been working on that for almost 2 years, and we reported it in its a variance explanation for the year-end estimate.
Oh, I must have missed it. So this is next,
No, it's upstairs in the front right corner of our space, so it's a sublease of a portion of CA
okay.
space.
Yeah, now
Is
it
that-
does sound familiar. The other thing is, there's something in here about a encroachment working group. What's that all about?
Say that again, what working group?
Encroachment working group?
Yeah, it's a staff,
I
cross-collaborative
mean, what
group.
are we looking at? Just-
We are trying to make sure that we're documenting and reviewing if we think there are encroachments, what's been reported, starting to actually establish a process to do that regularly with a cross-functional group.
And this would be for all CA land everywhere?
Yes.
Okay,
We're kind of
good.
just at the start of that, yep.
Great.
Eric, and then Ginny?
Yeah, question. Do you know when we're going to have a list of tot lots scheduled for replacement and what that list would be?
I can get that for you. I can get that for you next week.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, for the record, this is not a free-for-all question and answer session, so let's stick to the topics. Ginny?
Yeah, I'll follow up on the encroachment question. I like that idea of having different people from different departments work on it. Did you make a decision regarding the stream on Thunder Hill Road and the encroachment there? The fence and the piping into the stream?
We can follow up on
Because
that.
that's been going on since August.
We'll follow up on that.
All right, any other questions from the things on the list? Okay. I almost hesitate to ask, but propose new topics?
You can't.
All right. Okay, so thank you, everyone. We are coming to the end of this fiscal year. Thank you for the wonderful financials and the good news out of the dashboard. That was nice to have, as spring is warming things up, also having some good news, so thank you. And thank you, again, to all the teams that have been involved in all of the things that are required, both to monitor and, cut expenses, make sure that staffing is what it needs to be, as well as Dan, the tremendous staff at all of the clubs. All right, so then also, as we heard tonight, the employee retention tax credit partially will fund emergency cash reserves. I was really happy to hear that, so yay for that. And just note that we have one more work session and one more board meeting in this year. Next session is April 14th at 7. It will be hybrid. And we will continue talking about the Minority Business Enterprise Program, and that vote is scheduled for April 28th. We'll also be talking about the funding the emergency cash reserves, as well as the report out on the advisory committee subcommittee that Andy has been chairing. And we will have a presentation of the revisions to the ethics policies that Wes has been working on. Sherry.
Yeah, I'd like to ask that at the April 14th work session, can we have a draft of the CA calendar for the following year? There are particular dates that are supposed to be in the calendar year every year, for example, for the president's evaluation, other types of things of that kind. I think it would be very helpful for the board to see at the end of this session what that next year looks like in terms of what dates, what the requirements are for the board actions, and certain events that have to take place at certain times. I think Janet probably has that information.
Yeah, we've been working on it internally, so we can
Okay, so
share it
if we
with
can
the board.
have like a one-pager that everybody on the board can get, that would be helpful.
And thank you for mentioning President's Valuation. So in case you didn't know, I'm leaving for Hawaii next Thursday. So prior to doing that, I will be sending out the survey for President's Evaluation. Keep in mind that we want to have that completed in time to be able to review it as a group if we so choose once those results come in. So I will put deadlines on it, but I just wanted to make you all aware so that we can deliver that to Lakey at the end of April. Okay, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Ginny moves.
I'll second.
Dick seconds. Anyone opposed? Okay, this meeting
Good night.
done at 9:08. Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.